Hi, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and today again we return to Norway and part of our Norway in Flames. Another historical game, but we've put a few twists into this one. This one is entitled To Kill the King. In the last episode I described King Hakon as the 8th, in fact he was the 7th, an interesting man in his own right, and he was an elected king. We're basically taking this from the action at Slikvar Steikin Plasseret, where the Fallschirmjäger and Norwegian forces clashed. So it'll be quite an interesting one with the king making an appearance. As you can see from the terrain that we've sort of deployed, again we're trying to simulate Norway. This is very difficult each week as we try to redo the sets, but again I think it's come out quite well. Now, Norwegian forces consist of a polyglot of forces in this action. Their mission will be to kill the German attaché, whilst the Germans will be out for the king and to capture or kill him. So there are no objectives, and basically it's about the Fallschirmjäger pushing forwards. Now, the Norwegians have a long history of skiing and also basically operating what was now known in those days it was a stang shooting, and they used Krag rifles, but now we see it as skiing biathlons, and this was based on military doctrine of patrol actions, skiing around and shooting at targets. The king, he will be there supported by his loyal guards who will be fearless, and we also have regular Norwegian rifle infantry. There are no heavy weapons in this game at all. It's purely rifles and machine guns, and they are opposed against the fearless hombres that are the Fallschirmjäger. Tough, highly trained, fearless veterans. These guys have a lot of combat experience, and they will be pursuing the king with vigour, I can assure you. Basically, the Fallschirmjäger will be moving up the table. They run into a roadblock, and then we're going to see what happens. Again, the deck will determine a lot of these events. So let's stand by for some action, and let's enjoy our rendition of To Kill a King. Well, let's jump straight off into the action. And the Fallschirmjäger have commandeered a number of Norwegian trucks and are making their way up towards in pursuit of the king. The rifle company, a Norwegian company, is awaiting them and immediately open fire. The Germans respond aggressively, and whilst the rest of the Norwegians are based beyond the small streamline, the Fallschirmjäger come straight at the rifle squads. They fire, but their fire is ineffective. A number of saves were made, and the Fallschirmjäger managed to get straight in and assault without remorse, without pity, and basically smash through the first small little rifle detachment. They managed to capture the doctor who's within the village building, and meanwhile the rest of their troops remain in their trucks and continue to press ahead until they come to the roadblock, whereupon they disgorge some infantry to try and remove the obstacle. At the same point in time, the Norwegians across the small lake move up some scouts, whilst the Germans are desperately trying to remove the roadblock, but are unable to and keep failing their skill checks. They're getting a bit frustrated and decide in the end of the day that they might as well start disgorging their infantry from the trucks, as several bogged down. In the small little village where the doctor was, the Germans managed to continue their fight as another platoon of riflemen appears, and a close action combat is fought in which there are only 4 survivors. Under the German Fallschirmjäger doctrine, they execute the prisoners not wearing uniforms, and this led to some debate within the club as to what had happened there, but it was military doctrine, so to speak. Meanwhile, they then press forward and get a rather lucky card, which makes them effectively move at the double without a penalty. We call this no sweat. And they move towards where the heavy machine guns were, but they effectively decide not to open fire and fall back. Meanwhile, the king suddenly appears and arrives near the cafe with his guards. The scouts have pressed on up to the hill line, and the Germans are continuing their advance. grateful, having seen the line, that they won't now have to deal with the machine guns. It's a very entrenched position they've got, and they launch an attack, and this goes quite well at first, but the defensive fire repels them, and the Germans look somewhat cautious and nervous, but then decide, no, we're going to go for this, and press on. At this point, the German casualties have been quite light, and it's looking quite good now that the heavy machine guns have been redeployed, and so they press forward with considerable vigour. They then make a combined assault with 2 platoons and start driving heavily at the enemy. The skirmish scouts who've been on the top of their hill come under some small light mortar fire, but were ineffective, as a huge melee now takes place on the stream. It's very brutal fighting. The Fallschirmjäger lose a number of bases, and the Norwegians are getting punished. However, the Norwegians decide to retire and try and buy more time for the king, who's still trying to get all his goods and cabinet together so that they can make a rather hasty exodus. The Germans assault again. This time they drag in as many troops as they've got, but this basically triggers the Royal Guard, who counterattack, and a bloody melee ensues, in which again only about 4 of the Fallschirmjäger managed to get away. Many saves were made by the medic during this action. The 3rd platoon of the Fallschirmjäger, a much smaller platoon, now moves forward, covered and supported by the Kratschützen, who've lost a bike, and ultimately they get artillery as well and manage to range in, which is quite phenomenal, because for 3 turns they'd completely failed, requiring 3s. The king now is in desperate stakes. If the Germans break through in their next assault, the king could be captured. And so, although he's pleading and imploring to stay in the fight, his sort of bodyguard removes him physically and starts manhandling him towards the rear. The Germans smash through again, and once again the Royal Guards hold their ground. And as the king falls into the wood line, what we see is basically the Fallschirmjäger triumphant. They manage to smash into the village. There are only about 9 or 12 of the guards left. They manage to loot the king's wagons, having shot the vehicles down. And so ultimately it's a draw, because neither side met their objectives. But it's a huge propaganda victory for the Fallschirmjäger. But the king remains, and that was critical, because had he been lost, the entire Norwegian army would have been considered reluctant. So a great little game which we really knocked up, and we really enjoyed playing it, and it was actually met with great moments within the game. So if you like our work, please continue to support us, and stay tuned for more from Norway coming up soon. Over and out.